Greg, thank you very much. You read that just like my mother wrote it. So she's the only one that believes any of that anyway. So I appreciate that. I can't tell you what an incredible honor it is today for me to be able to be here. Matthew, I'm glad you could make it. Met him out in the hallway. It's a thrill and an honor. Several of you I've known from the past. And Jennifer, thanks for being here. Blair's, I won't point you out. Happy birthday, by the way. If you see a lady in the front row wearing red, you can say happy birthday to her later. I won't mention anything else besides that. I asked her if she wanted us to sing to her, and she said, no, don't even mention it. So I'm not going to mention it to anybody else that it's your birthday. But, hey, happy birthday, by the way. Growing up, how many of you, start off here, how many of you have heard me before, or this is your first time? Can I see your hands, please? That's a pretty good odds right there. How many of you are currently in production ag? Can I see your hands? How many of you feel like you live in the middle of nowhere? Raise your hands because you're from Iowa. And most of the country thinks you're in the middle of nowhere, right? I mean, most people don't even know what this place is until it comes to a little thing called an election, right? So I can't tell you what an honor it is for me to be here. And for those of you who are coming in late, there's seats on the front row. I won't mention it or point you out or anything like that. But those who show up late get the first row, just like church, right? Of course, some of you are like, what's that mean? And that means you should go to church if you don't understand that. Growing up in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. Grew up on a farm and a ranch in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. How many of you graduated valedictorian of your high school class? Anybody in here? Anybody in the room? No, not one single person in here graduated valedictorian of your high school class? No one? Well, that's why I'm here today, because I graduated valedictorian of my high school class. Of course, there were only 6 of us. So you know you're from a small town when to be in the top 10%, you have to be number 1. So if you don't understand that, I'll explain the math to you later as a valedictorian. So growing up in rural New Mexico, growing up on a farm and a ranch, you know, we're just not normal, are we? I mean, people look at us and they're like, you know what, you guys, you farm? I mean, they don't even think we're normal people, right? So growing up in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico, I have a warped sense of humor. How many of you like a good practical joke? Anybody in here like a good practical? Right? You're my people. So one of the things that my dad and I have done for years is we raise a beef. If you want a custom, if you want a half a beef, we raise, y'all get it. We raise the whole thing, cut it in half. Y'all understand that, right? So one of my customers, longtime customers, is a state representative from Roswell, New Mexico, right? UFO capital of the world. No jokes there. A politician from Roswell. So Representative Gardner's coming into town one day for a meeting, and he calls me up and he goes, hey, is my beef ready? And I said, I'm sure it is. I said, when you get into town, just stop at McDonald's and I'll jump in with you and we'll run out and to the plant and get your beef. He says, okay. So we do that. We run out to the plant. The beef wasn't ready yet. I said, no big deal. I said, let's just go back to McDonald's. We can chat for a while and then come back later. And he goes, okay. So we pull back up to McDonald's. And our McDonald's is old school. Remember when they had the single door down here and then the 2 double doors, and that single door was for all you people that just wanted to sneak in, use the bathroom, not buy anything, and keep a clear conscience? Know what I'm talking about? My vehicle was parked right in front of that single door. There was another vehicle right next to that. And Gardner pulls up right in front of the 2 double doors. And we pull up there, and the place is packed, and it's 5 o'clock. The coffee crowd's in there, right? So we start chatting, and we don't even get out of the car. So we're having an amazing conversation with each other, just sitting there in the parking lot. And in a little bit, this elderly gentleman comes walking out of the door, and he reaches into his pocket, and he grabs his keys to unlock his car, which is parked in between Representative Gardner's rig and my rig. But instead of hitting his unlock button, he hits his alarm button, and his horn starts going off. Anybody ever done that before? Not next to a jackwagon like me. So as soon as I can, Larry, I grab the keys out of my pocket, and as soon as he turns his horn off, I turn mine on. And he looks, he turns his on, I turn mine off, he turns his off, I turn mine on. Gardner's laughing so hard, I'm finally like, shut up, dude, you're going to blow our cover. I finally let the guy turn his horn off, and I wait 3 seconds. And I turn it back on, and he steps to throw his keys across the parking lot. I turn it off real fast. He looks down at us, he goes, I don't know. And we're like, we don't know either. How many of you from ag feel like there are people out there who are constantly pushing your buttons? Anybody ever feel that way? Right? Isn't that the nature of our customer base at this point in time? We feel like people are constantly out there pushing our buttons. And we have to handle that, don't we? And along the way, we have to actually do our job, don't we? And along the way, have you ever dealt with any snakes? Like real ones? Like this one? So you get it. You know, like I'm from New Mexico. We drive. We put a lot of miles on a vehicle. I had a 2-year-old, I had a Ford Power Stroke pickup that had 200,000 miles on it. And I realized that at some point in time, I'm going to have to get another vehicle, right? So my brother and sister-in-law had a 2-year-old Chevrolet Tahoe that had 100,000 miles on it. They go to trade it in. They're not going to get anything for it. He calls me up and he goes, hey, if you want it, we'll let you have it for what they offered us on trade-in. And I'm like, all right. It's half the miles of mine and it's red. My standards are high. So I buy this thing. Nicest vehicle I've ever owned. I had not had this thing for 2 weeks, and I'm heading to the airport in Lubbock, Texas, which is where I fly out. I had my old pickup and a 24-foot stock trailer hooked on behind it, and my 2-week-old Chevrolet Tahoe right next to that. I go running out the back door. My last name is Rush, and I'm usually in a hurry, and I might have been a little late. I throw my bags in that Tahoe. I start backing out of the driveway like I always back out of the driveway. I start looking over at the neighbor's barn to see what they're doing because, hey, that's important. I'm checking the neighbor's place out. I turn like I always turn, but I forgot that trailer was hooked on behind my pickup. I turned like I turned. I took the right front fender of my 2-week-old Tahoe and hit the rear end of that trailer. The bracket that holds the tail light catches the fender and it peels it like it's a tin can. It catches the bumper and twists the bumper halfway down. The headlights fall out like it just lost its eyeball. And I get out and I'm like, well, shoot, I can't blame anybody but me because me and my multiple personalities are the only ones here, right? So I'm like, there's no way I can take this thing to the airport. Unhook the trailer, jump in the old truck, head to the airport. I get back home and I'm looking at this thing and I realized that I have probably bent the frame when I twisted the bumper down. So I'm like, I got to get an estimate on this thing. So I head to town. About halfway to town, a buddy of mine's in the field plowing and I call him up and I'm like, Barry, you got to stop when you get to the end of the row. You got to see how bad I tore this thing up. He says, okay, so he gets to the end of the row and gets out and I'm pull over. It's eastern New Mexico. We ironed it at statehood and took all the trees out. So you can see your dog going away for 2 weeks. So I pull over on the side of the road. He gets to the end of the road and he gets out and he starts walking towards it. He goes, good grief. He goes, how fast were you going? I was like, I was backing up. He goes, I think you probably bent the frame. I'm like, I know, right? So we're leaning down to investigate whether or not I bent the frame. And as we're leaning down to look in the front of this bumper, about that time, a snake sticks its head up out of the bumper. I kid you not. We screamed like schoolgirls. We go running back and I'm like, oh my gosh. He goes, what are we going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. But he said, I don't know, but I'm not touching your snake. I'm like, thank you very much. But what are we going to do? So I get this stick and I walk back up there and I put this stick on the snake's head. Okay, I can tell that it's a garden snake, but I don't care. It moves without legs. That's not natural. So I put this stick on the snake's head and I'm like, now what? And he said, I told you I'm not touching that snake. And he heads back to the tractor. And I'm like, dude, you got to help me. And ladies and gentlemen, so where 2 mortal men came together and formed one superpower, immortal mind. He said, I know. When you get to town, go by the car wash and take the power blaster and blast the snake out. To which I replied, that's a good idea. So I head to town. About halfway on up from there, I start laughing and I think to myself, I think I'll just leave the snake in the bumper. No, it's going to get better. So I pull up in front of that first body shop and I laugh. I'm laughing so hard. I finally compose myself and think, okay, I got to go inside. The sign on the door says free estimates and I'm like, whoo, double bonus, right? So I walk inside. FFA Livestock Judging Days. The guy in this place probably weighed somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 1,500 pounds. He had a cigarette in his mouth. He had a cigarette in his left hand. And he had a third cigarette in an old-style ashtray clipped onto the table in case A or B failed him. And I thought, you know what? If he lays down to look underneath, I got to tell him because I ain't doing mouth-to-mouth on no dude, and I hate to watch a brother die. So he and I go walking out, and he sees the Tahoe. He goes, good grief. He goes, how fast are you going? I was like, I was backing up. He goes, looks like you probably bent the frame. I'm like, I know, right? So he starts this estimate. He never lays down to look underneath, and I'm like, whoop. Next, it's at this point in time, I'm prepared to go to every body shop in a 3-state area if I have to. I pull up to the next place. They're covered up with business. The manager says, if you don't mind, sir, I'll let the assistant manager start the estimate, and as soon as I'm done, I'll come out and I'll finish. To which I replied, that's fine with me, because at this point, not about the estimate. So me and the assistant manager go walking out the door, and he sees the Tahoe. He goes, good grief. He goes, how fast are you going? I was like, I was backing up. He goes, looks like you bent the frame. I know, right? So he starts the estimate. And a little bit, the manager comes walking out, and the manager goes, wow. And both of us in unison goes, he was backing up. So the assistant manager had one of those silver metal clipboards. You know what I'm talking about? We keep them in grain trucks, right? So he had one of those silver metal clipboards. The assistant manager hands the clipboard to the manager. And as soon as his hands release from the clipboard, he looks at me and he says, so, have you looked underneath? To which I replied, no. No, I have not. He lays down on his back. He scoops underneath the front of that Tahoe. He's not under there 3 seconds. He comes shooting out of there. He's over in the corner of the building, and he's leaving planet Earth with every scream of his being. He's like, why? Why? And I'm like, what? He said, a snake. And I said, what? He goes, there's a snake in there. I said, you got to be kidding me. He goes, dude, I looked it in the eyes. I'm like, what are we going to do? He goes, we're going to kill the expletive snake. And it was at that point in time I had to decide to save the snake's head or mine. And well, quite frankly, I'm still here. How many of you feel like there's a few snakes along the way? Right? Have you ever worked with any of those people? There's a few snakes that we run into in life, aren't there? And there's a few snakes that know those snakes are there and don't bother to tell you, right? And we have to be able to handle that, don't we? Today, Iowa Pork, I'm going to give you 3 things that I absolutely think we have to do if we're going to continue to be successful and as successful as we've been in the past. We have to be viable, we have to be valuable, and we have to be visible. Have you ever seen a one-legged duck out on water? What's a one-legged duck do on water? It goes in a circle. And isn't that kind of how we operate? And you think of the nature of what we do. It's plowing, planting, cultivating, harvest, Christmas. Plowing, planting, cultivating, harvest, Christmas. Or for us in the cow-calf deal, it's calving season, branding season, weaning. We go to winter wheat, and then it's Christmas. And it's Christmas, and it's Christmas. And it goes about that fast, doesn't it? And from the time we're little bitty kids, what are we told time's going to do as we get older? It's going to do what? It's going to go faster. And we think there ain't no way, right? And then what happens? Then it's Christmas. And then it's Christmas. And then it's Christmas. There are 3 things we have to do if we're going to continue to be as successful as we've been in the past. We have to be viable, we have to be valuable, and we have to be visible. Let's take the first one, viable. What does the word viable even mean? One of the definitions, if you pull up Dr. Google and ask Dr. Google what viable is, one of the definitions you'll get is willing and able to grow. Like a seed. A seed, to be a viable seed, has to be what? Willing and able to grow. And isn't that kind of how we are? Several years ago, I had the opportunity to go on the McCloy Fellowship. It's a partnership between the American Farm Bureau and the American Council on Germany and the German Farm Bureau. They take 4 people, and we spent 3 weeks in Germany. Myself, a wheat farmer from Montana, a dairy producer from Pennsylvania, and a lady from Washington, D.C. We actually were there for 24 days, and in 24 days, I only paid for 4 meals. Larry, they treated us like we were royalty, because you know I don't miss too many meals, right? Obviously. I tell my wife all the time, she's lucky because I have the body of a god. Unfortunately for her, it's Buddha, right? Sorry about her. We're there for 24 days, meeting with different ag officials, touring different farms and different hog operations, and met with the Ministry of Ag for the country of Germany. We met with the Ministry of Ag for the European Union in Brussels, Belgium. Trip of a lifetime. But by the end of 3 weeks, what are you just ready to do? You're just ready to come home, right? And to complicate that and to make that even worse, we look at our itinerary, and on our itinerary it says the last place we're going is in Hamburg, up by the North Sea. Spectacularly beautiful place. But we see on the agenda that we're going to a grain handling facility. I'm sorry, but if you've been to one grain elevator, you've been to them all, right? Grain goes in, stored, grain goes out. Pretty universal process no matter where you're at on the planet, right? We're not excited about this last stop. We're going to power through the day. Our driver picks us up at the hotel, proceeds to drive to downtown Hamburg, which would be like driving to downtown Des Moines. Skyscrapers, city just like this. We pull up in front of this building, and there's the capstone above the two doors has a name on it that matches what's on our agenda, so we know we're in the right place, right? And we go in, and we had to go through security that was tighter than the security at the European Union building in Brussels, Belgium. And we walk down this long hallway as two-thirds of the length of this room. And we walk down this long hallway, and there are pictures of barges at ports of call all over the world. And we get into this conference room. The conference room was as big as this area up here. The tables were set up in a U shape. To this day, I can still tell you where each one of us were seated. And a little bit, this young gentleman comes in with a suit and a tie that was poorly tied, and I thought, yep, they just sent us the intern. But then this young man proceeded to talk about this company, which is the second largest importer and exporters of grain in the world, second only to Cargill, bigger than ADM. He talked about how he dealt in profits and losses of metric tons of half cents that equated to billions of dollars a year. And then he said something that I've never forgot, and I've told every ag group that I've talked to since that point in time. He said, I'm going to tell you Americans something that you don't want to hear, but you need to hear it. Okay, time out. What do we do as Americans when somebody else says something like that to us? Right? You can see our chests go up. We're like, bring it, buddy. We won the last war in this country. We'll win the one in this room. Like, yeah, fight is on. He said, I'm going to tell you something that you don't want to hear, but you need to hear it. And he said this. He said, I don't care if you make a crop in the United States of America, because if you don't make it, Canada will. If Canada doesn't make it, Mexico will. If Mexico doesn't make it, Australia will. If Australia doesn't make it, Europe will. And he said, and in 30 days, he said, I can have anything I want anywhere on this ball we're riding around on. In 30 days, I can have anything I want on the globe. And you know a thought that went through my head at that point in time? The thought that went through my head is, are we good at what we do here? Are we good at what we do here? You doggone right we're good at what we do. In fact, we're the best at it. One of our states alone, California is the fifth largest ag economy by itself in the world. Are we good at what we do in agriculture in this country? You're doggone right we're good. But who are we competing against now? Are we competing against other producers in Iowa? Yeah, we're still competing against other producers in Iowa, but who else are we competing against? The world. Right here in little Iowa, we're competing with other producers all over the globe. Are we viable? Yeah, absolutely. I say those of us in agriculture define the word. We define the word viable because we're so good at what we do here. But do you think that also means we're going to have to become even better than we've ever been in the past if we're going to continue to be the leader? Yes, absolutely. Which leads it to the second point about valuable. How are we valuable in ag? How is Iowa Pork Producers Association? How are you valuable? What do you do? Go ahead. We feed the world, do we not? Does that not mean we're valuable? We feed the world. I pulled your stats too. You can go to the NASS USDA Ag Services website. I pulled the stats for the state of Iowa. 2016 are the latest numbers that we have so far. In this state alone, you have over 87,000 farms. You are the stewards of 30,500,000 acres of land. You had 22,200,000 hogs in inventory. Does that make you valuable? Oh, but there's more. You are, Iowa, you are number one in the country for grains. You are number one in the country for corn. You are number one in the country for soybeans. You are number one in the country for layers. You are number one in the country for pullets. And by gosh, you're number one in the country when you surpass the next 5 states in total for hog production. Does that make you valuable? I say that makes you amazingly valuable. You're part of an industry that ranks number one in more categories than any other ag industry in this country. This is you. You bring in a total, this is not an actuated number, you bring in a total dollar figure to this state of $30,821,532,000, ranking you number 2 in the country, only to Texas, in total value of all ag products sold. Does that make you valuable? That makes you crazy valuable. But do people in the Capitol building know? Do our customers know? And I think for me, it comes down to, several years ago I was asked to write a 1-page article on what I felt was the future of agriculture. And here's what I said. What is your personal outlook on the future of agriculture? And this is what I said. I said, now that's a question that could be answered in one line. It depends on which day of the week you ask. Agriculture probably provides the greatest fluctuation from optimism to pessimism than any other industry on the face of the earth. From markets to weather to legislative issues to just plain old hard work, and the list could go on and on and on, right? We are constantly faced with daily changes and challenges. One thing which no one could argue with is that agriculture and her people are resilient. We've always handled the ups and downs, maybe with an ounce of doubt, but never with a second guess that what we do is exactly what God Almighty intended for us to do. And we believe that's true down to our core, don't we? And nothing or no one's ever going to change that. To answer the question, though, the future of agriculture is guaranteed to be successful because, bottom line, people like to eat, right? So the more important question should be, what is the future of American agriculture? And I would say that the answer to that question could be summed up in one word, and that's challenging. For many years, dare I say centuries, the only obstacle that the American farmer was faced with was, can I produce a crop and can I get enough for it? And for the most part, you know what? That was it. Today, we're not only faced with those age-old issues, but we're faced with obstacles that my granddad, even my dad, would never have dreamed of. If you would have went up to my dad 50 years, even 25 years ago, and told him that there was going to come a day, if he stayed in agriculture, that the majority of people in this country look at you like you're insane because you're just a farmer. If you would have told him that there was going to come a day when those of us in agriculture would have to hire lobbyists at the state and national levels of our government just to defend our right to produce the food and fiber that feed and clothe those who fight against us, he would have told you were insane. His response probably would have had a few adjectives laced in there to make sure you understood how crazy you were. He might have even told you that we would never see a day like that in this country. And that the American people would never forget where their food and fiber comes from. And the American people would never forget to take care of those of us who feed and clothe not only this country, but countries all over the planet. But the sad reality is that we're living in that day. And those challenges that we face go one step farther. They extend beyond our own borders. Those challenges extend continents. We face an ever-growing, ever-changing, and ever-challenging future. And on some days, quite frankly, it even looks bleak, doesn't it? But no one should ever doubt that the future of American agriculture is strong because, Iowa pork producers, we are the future of American agriculture, right? Does that make us valuable? My goal for you today is when you walk out those doors, you feel a renewed sense of value in what you do and who you are. But more importantly, it leads to the third point, which is about being visible. And why is it important for us to be visible? And I say it's because we have a lot more opponents than we have advocates, right? And maybe that's not true. Maybe it's because our opponents are more vocal than our advocates, right? We did a study and based it in the most, quote, liberal area of Albuquerque, New Mexico. 1.2 or 5 million people in that area. We found the what we felt was the area that was most removed from ag, right? And very not politically like most of us in ag, right? And we did a study. We did a little poll. Over 80% of the people that we felt were farthest removed for ag still had a positive view of people who farmed and ranched. We were shocked. And why is that? Why do they think that? We were blown away that we had that high of an approval rating with those people that are farther away. Because it doesn't feel like we deal with that in our state capitals or our national capital, does it? It doesn't feel like we have that kind of approval rating with the majority of people that we deal with, do we? But when they think of farming and ranching, what do they think of? They think of this little pitchfork, right? This little notorious photo called American what? And they define us by that and think we're pretty cool. But in reality, they don't even know us, do they? They don't know us. They don't know why we do what we do. But more importantly, they don't understand why it matters to them. Recently, just about 6 weeks ago, there was a tweet that was sent out by an MSNBC producer. Kyle Griffin's his name, if you want to look this up, just to prove what I'm saying. MSNBC producer Kyle Griffin tweeted out, and then it was retweeted by someone else at MSNBC with the last sentence added to it. So he said this, MSNBC, right? Any power there? MSNBC producer Kyle Griffin tweeted, by 2040, about 70% of Americans are expected to live in the 15 largest states. Okay? It's not that far away, is it? By 2040, about 70% of Americans are expected to live in the 15 largest states. They will have only 30 senators representing them, while the remaining 30% of America will have over 70 senators representing them. When it was retweeted out, this was the quote that was added to it. This is the core threat to our democracy, the rural minority. Do you feel like the core threat to our democracy? Do you? What do we consider ourselves in rural America? I say we consider ourselves the stinking backbone of our democracy, right? We're what this country was built on, right? But we have national reporters saying that we're the core threat to democracy. Do you think that means we might need to start telling our story? I think maybe so. And the point was driven home to me on a flight from Albuquerque, New Mexico to Denver, Colorado. I was flying to Wyoming to speak at a young farmer and rancher conference. Notice I said you fly from Albuquerque to Denver. You don't fly from Denver to Wyoming. They put you in a box and they throw you. If you don't know God, you're going to meet Him before you hit the Wyoming state line and you're going to want to be His friend, right? You know it's going to be an interesting flight when the pilot is also the flight attendant and tells you there's a cooler in the back. And we're like, we got the back half, buddy. You keep the front, right? But what happened on the flight from Albuquerque to Denver. And I tell everybody, I've got the worst luck of anybody when it comes to flying. I mean, if there's a 900-pound mountain man who hasn't brushed his teeth nor spoke to anybody in 6 months, he's going to fly the day I fly. He's going to get the center seat and he's going to want to chat. But on this flight, I have 2 empty seats next to me. And I'm like, giddy up, right? I mean, this never happens. They pack us in airplanes like we pack cattle in trailers. I mean, karma gets us back on planes, right? I don't even know who she is, but she gets me back every time I fly. So I'm sitting there and we have these 2 empty seats and I am stoked, right? I am thrilled. And we sit there and then we continue to sit there to the point that we're all starting to get frustrated because we're going to be late. You can feel the tension rising on the plane. As we wait, and then it happens. This lady-ish walks onto the front of the plane. She has on a black spandex unibody suit. She has on cowboy boots that come up to her knees that are so pointy they could drive a finishing nail in a baseboard. She has on a white fur coat that goes to the floor, and to top off said ensemble, valedictorian word, she has on a purple straw cowboy hat she obviously bought at your or my state fair. And when she walked onto the front of the plane, I thought, there she is. That's my gal. She walks onto the plane and she starts apologizing to every person on every row as she makes her way to the center of the plane. She gets to my sacred row and she says, "Are these seats taken?" To which I reply, "Mama said I couldn't lie. No, they're not." She takes her fur coat off. I feel like I've just sinned. She puts it in her overhead bin. As quick as I can, I grab the magazine out of the seat in front of me and shove my face in it. I don't even notice that it's upside down, but I just want to shove my face in it because I do not want to have a conversation with this super freak, right? And then she starts to talk to the point that I realize that I am going to have a conversation with this. I put the magazine down and I say, she says, "So what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I farm and ranch and I do leadership training and motivational." And before I could even finish, she interrupts me and she goes, "You're a real live farmer?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you want to pinch me?" She said, "I've never met a real live farmer." And I'm like, "Today's your lucky day." She said, "Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?" I said, "Not at all." Reporters, I'm telling you, she proceeded to ask me questions like I have never been asked in my lifetime. She asked me about GMOs. She asked me about organic, non-organic. She asked me about animal handling practices. She asked me about farm subsidies. She asked me about the farm program. She asked me one question right after another, right after another. She challenged my thinking on some questions. Amazing conversation with each other. To the point we're still talking to each other as we walk out the jet bridge into the terminal in the Denver airport. And we get out into the terminal of the Denver airport and she sits her bag down and she starts going through her bag. And in a little bit she comes up and she says, "Here." She said, "I want you to have my personal business card. Because if I ever make it big in acting, I want to be your spokesperson. If I ever make it big in acting, I want to be your spokesperson." You know the first thought that went through my head? First thought that went through my head was, shame on me. Because someone looked different than I do. And quite frankly, because someone looked different than we do. I didn't want to have a conversation with her. But because I got over myself long enough to have a conversation with her, I had somebody saying, "I want to be your spokesperson." Iowa pork producers, can you even begin to imagine what kind of world we would exist in if we had people in our state capitol standing up for us? Can you imagine if we had people at the state and national levels of our government standing up for us, defending us, telling our story for us? Can you imagine it? If we had people in Hollywood, California standing up to defend our right to feed and fight and clothe people not only in this country, but countries all over the world. Can you imagine what kind of day that would be? I'm telling you, we can have that day because all it takes is us telling our story. But more importantly, it's about us telling why it matters to them. Because at the end of the day, people just want to know that what we do is okay. And it's good for them. And that what we do is okay for their kids to eat. And at the end of the day, they just want to know who we are, why we do what we do, but more importantly, why it matters to them. At the end of the day, they just want to know why we are just a farmer and a rancher, plain and simple. And several years ago, I wrote this poem, and I'd like to close with this. It says, I'm just a farmer and a rancher, plain and simple. I know the sun better than anyone, and the soil and the wind and the rain. I'm the man who works with them, who loves them, and who sometimes fears them. I'm just a farmer and a rancher, plain and simple. I'm the sower of seeds, the tender of stock, and the reaper of harvest. I am sweat and tears and pride. I am the black earth of spring, the green hills of summer, the harvest gold of autumn, and the cold white stillness of winter. I'm just a farmer and a rancher, plain and simple. I live in a complex world made of simple things, and they are my source of joy and hope and comfort. I'm just a farmer and a rancher, plain and simple. I have savored the breeze off freshly cut hay. I have stirred the soil, and in turn it has stirred my soul. I have awed at the first steps of a newborn animal. I have felt the power of 1,000 storms and rejoiced in the fresh world left in their wake. I'm just a farmer and a rancher, plain and simple. I'm an accountant, a chemist, a doctor, a midwife, a mechanic, a seller, a trader, a buyer, a helper, a comforter, and a teacher. I am perseverance, creativity, and courage. I am confidence and ingenuity and intelligence. I'm just a farmer and a rancher, plain and simple. Not a man of riches, but a man of great wealth. I have learned to treasure life and all things living, to respect their maker and my own. I am humbled by the earth's bounty and awed by endless rebirth. I am fascinated by the marvelous intricacies of my world, and I am enriched by their beauty. I'm just a farmer and a rancher, plain and simple. It's a solitary profession I've chosen, or perhaps that I've been chosen for. A profession where there are no certainties, no guarantees granted, no promises given, no excuses taken. But if a man can truly be free, I'm truly free. I'm just a farmer and a rancher, plain and simple. A seeker of excellence, and I will endure. Isn't that who we are? At our core, isn't that who we are? Ladies and gentlemen, you provide such value to the world that I can't even begin to put a description on it. As meager as I try, I can't even begin to describe what value you bring to the world. I can't even begin to comprehend or help you comprehend how incredibly valuable you are. We define those words. But we need you to be visible. We need you, and I do mean you and you and you and all of you. And I mean you and you and you and you. We need you to stand with us and tell your story. We need you to stand with us and tell the story of the greatest industry that's ever been, and that's agriculture. And along the way, there's going to be a few people who are going to be out there and they're going to be pushing your buttons, right? And there's going to be a few snakes along the way, and you're going to have to handle them too, aren't you? But at the end of the day, we provide a viability and a value second to no other industry on planet Earth. We do what God told Adam and Eve to do from the beginning of time. That's what we do. Iowa pork producers, we need you to stand with us and tell the greatest story of the greatest industry on planet Earth. We need you to stand with us and tell the story of one of the greatest industries in this state and in this country. We need you to stand with us and tell your story because you have the greatest story that's ever been told, and we need you. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for allowing me the time to be here, and I hope God blesses each of you immensely. So thank you very much. Thank you. Great. Thank you.
Wow, what an energizing end to our afternoon's keynote presenter. And Matt, while you were speaking, I wrote down 4 items here, and you ended them very powerfully. And I want to say to each of you, remember, we are not just farmers. Stand up for yourself. Stand up for agriculture, and humbly stand up as an advocate and be relevant, not just as a farmer. So thank you all so much for embracing what Matt has provided us here today. Thank you for coming to the Iowa Pork Congress, and enjoy the rest of your week here at Iowa Pork Congress. Thank you so much for being here.
Greg, thank you very much. Thank you. Truly.